If everyone wants to share in the chat where you're joining in from, I love seeing kind of all the different places show up. I mean, if our travel is a little bit limited right now, this is the closest thing I'm getting to more stamps in the passport. So Germany, Oslo, hello Spain, Aarhus, lots from Portugal, Poland, Munich, Brussels, Madeira Island. Well, I'm getting to join you from what I'm happy to say is sunny Boston. I live about 20 minutes west of Boston in an area that is, I would say, fairly rural. There's a good chance that a flock of wild turkeys may go past my office window while we're talking. If that happens, it is my commitment to you that I'll take my camera and aim it out the window so that we can all see the splendor that is a pack of 21 wild turkeys. You may hear them as well because like my mic is pretty decent. I've got it set so that it mostly picks up me, but again, they're turkeys. They're loud. They're very the gobble 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 is great with them. So I'll let you know if that happens, or if you just see me go, it's because the turkeys are here. So we'll wait just, I think, maybe one more minute or so. If you want to keep sharing where you're joining in from, that's wonderful to see. So as we're getting going, I just want to remind folks that grab probably a pencil or a pen and some paper, because there's going to be some parts of this where you'll want to make notes, write things down, and then we'll share. And that's kind of the thinking, I guess, around a master class. I want to share my experience and what I've learned in this industry, what I've learned doing research in this topic over the last several years. But also I want to hear from all of you in terms of how you're using this knowledge that we'll be gaining as we go along today. And I want the other participants to hear from you too. So there will be a few different points where we kind of bring things into sort of a fishbowl type atmosphere to bring a few people kind of into the middle, have you turn on your mics, turn on your cameras so that everybody can hear and we can learn from each other a bit too. So there will be different points where I'm asking for volunteers to do that. If you're able to turn on your mic and video, and I'll elevate you to be a panelist so that you can do that. Sarah asked, can we do a group note-taking in Google Doc? If someone wants to go ahead, set that up and drop the link in the chat, that's terrific. And yeah, I would love to see that afterward too. Sarah, since you asked, do you want to kind of take the reins on that? Awesome, thank you. All right, in that case, let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, are we seeing my slides A-okay? Can someone confirm there? Wonderful, all right. So today we're going to talk about designing for trust. And I'm excited that you're all here to do that because I look at this as one of the biggest challenges and opportunities facing us right now. Biggest challenge because I look at what is going on in society, certainly here in the US, but across the EU and across the world around trust and cynicism. And I see real opportunities for us to kind of do things better, to do things differently. And I think that a lot of that work can start with what we're doing in design and content strategy and user experience research and design, information architecture, marketing, kind of all of those different disciplines. And I think that the opportunity there is, it isn't that design can fix the world, but I do think that design and designers can make the world more worth saving. this problem around trust and cynicism, it isn't ours alone, but I do think that we are uniquely positioned to bring our skills to it and to work on it. So that's what I want to focus on today. So if you do have questions, I'll try to keep an eye on the chat, but I expect it'll be moving quickly too. Otherwise, post them in questions and so that I can see them there as well. If you have questions for technical help, send that directly to UXLX Masters there. You'll see them listed as a panelist. If you want to tweet about anything that we're discussing, that is terrific, because I think that's the kind of stuff that brings more visibility to this work, to these problems. Use the conference hashtag UXLX Masters. Feel free to tag me in it, and anything that you want to grab as far as like screenshots, tweets, etc. Push it out there. I think that it's good to socialize these ideas, because what we do is it's a discipline that does not just focus on deliverables. So much of what we do relies on conversation and collaboration. And the more that we can talk about these topics to kind of bring our ideas out into the open and test them and get feedback, whether that's in a critique or on a platform like Twitter, that's all good stuff. And certainly in that Google Doc now that is now open for editing. So as I said, grab paper and a pencil or your favorite pen, because we are going to be doing some work and talking and sharing. Now, I want to frame things appropriately for this, because I am here, you are here, because our audiences and our users don't necessarily trust us anymore. I don't trust you. You don't trust me, so neither of us should take this personally, because I think that's true for most people. We've gotten to this state in society where we don't necessarily trust everything that we hear. We don't trust most of what we hear. And I don't think we can really blame anybody for that. I don't know that we can really blame people for being in that state, because things have changed in our society over the past 10 years, maybe longer. Certainly as we've seen kind of the rise of social media and the way we get information around social media and then through and from social media, things have changed, but also our political discourse has shifted a lot. As a result, those issues that we maybe first noticed in politics and in media reporting on politics and politicians, the issues there have spread out into other parts of our society and certainly into every industry in which we work. And I think why this is important now is because if you work in retail or government or software, telecommunications or banking or some other industry, you've probably noticed how a lot of marketing falls flat. A lot of it just doesn't reach the desired end or reach its desired goals. Also, sales cycles have been taking a lot longer. Most messages don't really motivate action. Now, that's definitely increased during the pandemic, but it's not just because of the pandemic. And I think we're fooling ourselves if we argue otherwise. It's that people just don't trust brands the way they used to. And I don't think we can blame them, because they've endured failures of leadership, maybe deception and lies from their governments, as well as inconsistent messaging from governments and brands. And when people don't trust anymore, when they don't know who to trust, when maybe organizations that they thought they knew have now gone in a very different direction, when they don't know what to do with that information and how they internalize it, they decide not to believe anything, and then they grow cynical. And that's a problem, because that's what causes us to have problems making decisions. Now, the last time I spoke at UX Lisbon, I was talking about the topic of how to create slower experiences through design and content strategy. And my focus with that was that if you can help people slow down, they can oftentimes sit with their decisions more, to go through cycles of exploration and discovery and validation and confirmation, to look at information, decide what they think of it, and then sit with it a bit and then say, yeah, I do still want this item that I've put in my shopping cart, or I do still want to engage the government services in these different ways, or fill out this form, or I'm ready to submit this information. It helps people gain comfort with their decisions and confidence in their decisions. I want to attack that same problem now a different way, because I think the problem has evolved. And so our work has evolved too. Our response to it needs to evolve. Because as I said, we've kind of been tracking this over the past 10 years, maybe longer. And in the age of fake news and hidden agendas, cynicism that people are leaning into, it can often seem safe, maybe comfortable. People turn away from experts, then they take refuge in their filter bubbles. But then as we became more aware of our filter bubbles, many people eventually turned inward. But that's a problem, because that's where they see bigger issues. Because if your government or if media and politicians have been gaslighting you, in other words, saying, don't believe the evidence of your own eyes, only get your information here, this is the one source of truth, that's when people start to distrust even their own instincts. We kind of lose our gut sensibility. And when they lose confidence in their ability to make good decisions or to research information and feel like they can make decisions that they feel good about, that's a problem. But that is where we can help them, because so much of design focuses on helping people make decisions, helping people move through experiences, have a sense that they know what they're doing, that they know how to interact with an interface, they know how to get the information they want from that interface. We know how to do these things. I want to take a more tactical approach to doing that now. So our job moving forward is to help people regain trust in themselves, and then in the world around them, in the organizations that can bring them high quality information, by respecting and empowering them. So to regain your audience, to help your brand or clients regain their audience and their trust, you need to rebuild confidence and empower our audiences to help them make good decisions. And in doing that, we can affirm their hope, their interest in learning, and their enthusiasm for feeling good about the information that they get, their enthusiasm for feeling knowledgeable. Because at the end of the day, we all like feeling smarter. We all believe that we can get smarter if we read one more article or watch one more video. And that work of helping people feel like they do know how to engage with the world around them, that's the work of designers. Now, this isn't a new problem. So I actually want to take us back more than 10 years. I wanted to go back several centuries. So if you will, we're going to go back to Renaissance era, actually pre-Renaissance era Europe. I want to talk about commerce there to discover what we can learn about information today. Because I think that the stuff that we struggle with around communication and trust, it's not new. People in the 1500s, whoops, sorry about that. People in the 1500s struggled with that too. And then the need for information, for good quality, high quality, trustworthy information, it was changing. Any guesses as to what was happening just before like the Renaissance in Europe? What was changing around information? You can just respond in the chat if you like. Something interesting was going on with, printing presses, how we got information through content, how people presented content too. Yeah, changes in the church. Something interesting was happening in commerce too. So what was going on there was that previously people that sold goods, maybe it was candles or salt or cloth, they would haul their wares from town to town in a region to all the different markets that were going on. We still see this to a lesser degree today. But something interesting was happening specifically in Europe, where markets and fairs were going on. People were bringing their goods there and kind of making a meager living, a meager existence there. But around that time in the 1500s, that's when we started to see trading families and empires start to really grow and explode as people realized that they could reach far greater markets. Yeah, Sarah said here, expansion of the market. They realized that they could make far greater profits, not by going to all these different markets, but rather by staying put and instead engaging in arbitrage among multiple cities and countries. The way they did this, the way that made it really successful for them, was that they needed to have information that they could trust about those different cities. So that might mean that merchants would engage guys like this. And I know what you're thinking, seeing him here. You can see like the scraps of paper on the wall, early Post-it notes. This is our first example of an information architect. He isn't. No, he's not an IA at all. He's a letter writer. He's he's a merchant that received letters. Those are letters that he has hanging up behind him from different people that would write to him, that were in his employment to write to him. So this is George Gies, and he's a Renaissance era trading merchant, and he represents kind of the emerging merchant class that we were seeing then, who would run export and import businesses across all of Europe. Now, that kind of work took specialized knowledge, not unlike being an IA, I suppose, but it took specialized knowledge about the cities in which he wanted to do business. He couldn't go to all of those places. Like now, travel was a little bit more challenging. So instead, to make good decisions, he would employ people that lived in those different cities to write to him with periodic updates about the economic conditions, maybe palace intrigue, or if there was talk of going to war, or what his competitors were doing. And they were writing from those foreign cities, those letter writers. They were correspondents. And those foreign correspondents were effectively the first journalists. So that's a pretty powerful thing when you think of it also in conjunction with the rise of the printing press soon after. Now, a journalist would empower merchants by giving them consistent details, a unique perspective, and a level of detail that they could trust, the right level of detail to meet their needs. They also offered vulnerability, that they were open to learning new things. They were open to brokering new relationships to get access to information. And they were also comfortable with correcting their ideas. Maybe if they wrote in one letter, yes, it looks like we're going to war and the country is going to be using a lot more metal now. In the next letter, they might have to say, I heard wrong. It turns out we've changed some of our policies. We're no longer planning to go to war. Don't worry about that anymore. So they were comfortable being vulnerable, of saying, I got new information. Let's learn better and do better, and I'm going to share that with you. So they kept themselves open in that way. They offered authority, consistency, and relevance. And that combination of authority, consistency, and relevance, that's what still empowers people today. That's still what we hold valuable and what we trust, because it helps us make better choices, maybe about where we want to shop, a product that we want to buy, where we want to eat, or how we want to vote. That's a powerful, powerful combination. So those foreign correspondents, they established authority, again, by sharing a unique perspective with the right depth of context and level of detail, and by sharing how their knowledge was constantly growing over time. So you can think of that as a unique voice, that kind of consistent, familiar voice, the right volume of detail, and strength through vulnerability by keeping themselves open to that information. And that's how they established authority, by saying, I'm here, you're not, so let me tell you about it. That's really how we define authority. And authority comes from being willing to go where your audience cannot. Maybe it's because the danger or the cost or the depth of expertise that it requires. And that's why when newscasters here, like Anderson Cooper, when he talks to us from a war-torn region, or when he comes to us live from Haiti, why people sit up and listen. That's why we tune in to the BBC to get their perspective on things. When Anthony Bourdain filmed from Lisbon, we listened because he said, I'm here, you're not, let me tell you about it. It's because we trust the kind of expertise that those people have gained, the unique viewpoints that they offer based on their own expertise and lived experience. And we also trust their vulnerability, that they're willing to take in new information, maybe engage in new experiences that cause them to correct their own misconceptions, and then bring us along on that kind of learning journey as well. That sort of journey, that level of expertise, that comes in a lot of forms. You don't have to be a war correspondent or a television chef. in order to have authority, because authority empowers and educates and respects us, because it doesn't speak down to its audience, but rather it offers the audience a ladder to say, let me meet you where you are with the vocabulary and jargon that you're using, and let me bring you to where you need to be to make better decisions. And none of those people that I mentioned, they don't gaslight us. They don't tell us that, okay, we expect absolute loyalty. Don't look to any other sources of information. They don't say, I'm the only source. And also they're offering us relevant information in the moment when we're tuning into them. And that happens on websites too. Here's what Jay Rosen, the press critic, said on authority. And I think that we can learn a good bit from him. I think we can bring some of his thinking then into our own work. Because when you speak with authority and relevance, people reward it in the form of trust. At this point, I do want to just break at one spot because I'm realizing I'm not seeing anything popping up in questions. So if you do have a question, feel free to just post it directly in the chat too. I want to keep kind of digging through this theory though, and bring you along to where I'm going. I want to offer you a ladder from where you are to where I want us all to be with this type of thinking, okay? And I appreciate the heavy listening, because this is where we are now. This is the state of cynicism that we're in. We probably all say this, maybe we've all been guilty of saying it, when issues of irrelevance and inconsistency pile up. Maybe it's in political speech, but really it's across all industries now, where people are suffering this crisis of trust, where we have problems believing outside perspectives or the scientific community. We have problems believing in marketing too, and why shouldn't we? And you probably see it not just as a designer, but as a consumer and a citizen and a reader. And we used to place trust in familiar brands and established media. Maybe they were organizations that you grew up with paying attention to because they reflected your reality. And that's an important thing, to see information in politics, to see information in the media corroborate your reality. We don't trust those same big institutions anymore. And maybe it's because they've been inconsistent with what they promise, with what they claim, or how they're speaking to us. But those inconsistencies are a creeping, sneaky thing, an insidious thing. That's what causes cynicism to take root. And like us, our users look at the world with more skepticism than trust. We bring these kinds of statements to the way we get information and kind of brush it all off, rather than dig through to say, well, what are the parts that are most meaningful and relevant to my needs? We turn away from news sources and say, well, you can't trust any of it, so why should you pay attention to any of it? And that's a powerful thing. That's kind of a painful thing, I think, certainly if you work in journalism. But it should also be a painful thing if you work in marketing, if you help detail the kind of information that goes into product interfaces, if you design them to be trustworthy experiences. Because that kind of inconsistency, as I said, it's a powerful and painful thing. Because when institutions that we once trusted tell us not to believe the evidence of our own eyes, that's gaslighting. And if you're not familiar with the term, it comes from a movie from, I think, the 1930s or 1940s, maybe. Probably 1940s, 1950s, called Gaslight. And in it, it was a kind of basic premise where a man and a woman living in an apartment were having some communication problems. She thought that she was going crazy because she kept thinking that the lights in their apartment were getting dimmer and dimmer. And she would turn to her husband and say, "Are you noticing this too?" And he would say, "No." "Oh, honey, don't worry about it. You're probably just tired, or you just don't pay attention to that. Just listen to me. It's fine in here." And what was going on was that he was dimming the gas light in their apartment. He was gaslighting her and saying, "Don't pay attention to the evidence of your own senses, only trust me." And when that happens, people become depleted inside. They lose their ability to understand the world around them because they don't trust themselves and their gut instincts. And if you don't do that, how do you know how to make a choice, how to vote, how to even make simple decisions like deciding what to have for dinner tonight? When our users are in that state, it's our job to reach out to them and say, all right, let's get you back on your feet. Let's empower you and address how we can build your confidence back up. Because that problem affects our very ability to trust in other brands and in ourselves and our gut instincts and our own perceptions. And I think it's a problem, but it's also our opportunity. This isn't all kind of like doom and gloom here, because I think we are well positioned to address it. So here's kind of the secret, sort of the problem statement for our work moving forward. To regain the trust of our audiences, we must empower our audiences with useful, usable information that respects them, respects their needs, their level of detail and the precision that they need, and respects their ability to weigh that information and move forward, kind of feeling confident about it. So if you work in marketing or content or design, I think you have the tools already to do this. We're going to be talking about those tools and practice using them, because whether your users are concerned citizens or consumers or other businesses or donors or voters, to regain their trust, you need to empower them. And I think that this is just as relevant in a B2B context as it is in a B2C context. Because by educating them and rebuilding their confidence in themselves, that's how we regain confidence and trust in our organizations as well, in the brands that we represent. And to regain your audience's trust, you simply need to empower them with useful, usable information. And it has three components. So as we do this, as we kind of talk through those three components, I just want to kind of tease on something that I saw just yesterday, actually that I heard just yesterday. So this is what it looks like right now in a pandemic. I was hearing on the radio in a show called On Point here in the States on NPR. And they had Zainab Tafeki in, and she was talking about what the nature of messaging in a pandemic needs to be like, how messaging needs to evolve. She said, throughout the pandemic, we failed to adjust our messaging to our understanding of the risk. So as scientists, we're learning more and more about how coronavirus spreads, how COVID-19 as a virus is transmitted between people. We've continued to learn more about, well, does it spread on surfaces or through fomites in the air? As we learned that it was an airborne disease, we needed to adjust our messaging to tell people maybe less about using hand sanitizer and more about wearing masks, more about avoiding indoor dining experiences. But we didn't always do that. So as a result, people were operating at this height of vague, uncertain risk, a lot of fear, but not a lot of information to decide how to direct their energy. If you were just hearing, do all of these things because they're of equal importance, eventually you get kind of burned out on that. But she said we failed to adjust our messaging to our understanding of the risk. And I think that's due in part to the fact that we don't really allow for a lot of vulnerability in communication from political leaders or from scientists. I think throughout the past year, a lot of us have learned more about science and that it is not always final settled information, but it's evolving. Those authorities that we trust, we need to also allow them to kind of evolve to say, we learned something new, here's what we recommend now. That's not a failure of science. That is the process of science. And if you don't trust people with communication, if you don't trust people with information, she said, they won't trust you back. So we need to decide, can we trust our audiences? Can we respect our audiences enough to give them information to be able to make good decisions? Maybe not necessarily about life in a pandemic. Maybe it's about things that are far more mundane, but it's our job to figure out how to deliver that information. So as I said, there are three main components to this. To regain your audience's trust, you empower them with useful, usable information through voice, or the familiar tone of voice that we use, volume, or the amount of detail that we're expressing visually and verbally, and vulnerability. And I mean that as a strength. We'll talk about all three of these. And those are the same tools that Renaissance era letter writers used so well to establish authority, to offer information that was relevant and useful and usable. So let's start by talking about voice. This is where I'm going to be asking you to get your pencils ready if you want to take some notes as we move into the exercise, but also to be prepared to share a little bit. So voice refers to the distinct personality that manifests visually and verbally in everything that a brand does. So does your organization project creativity? Is it witty and quirky, or maybe more polished or traditional or scholarly? Maybe it's more iconoclastic and is always trying to kind of rock the boat and kind of propose new ideas. Your voice helps your audience understand who you are and how you are, and if there's someone that they can trust. People are always unconsciously, implicitly making that assessment. And when a brand changes over time, it becomes harder for their audience to make that assessment, to understand who they are and how they are. But of course, our organizations are always changing. Maybe we're rolling out new products and services, pursuing new offerings. Those are good changes. But when we're making those big changes, or when we see a lot of change and upheaval going on in society around us, it's probably not the right time to also roll out a new brand or to prompt things in a new voice, because it runs the risk of alienating our older audience or our existing customers. But by using a consistent voice to propose maybe new changes or offer new products, by doing that in plain language that people can understand, or familiar jargon that establishes rapport with your audience, that's how people can maintain their confidence, both in the brand, but also in themselves, that they understand where the brand is going. So let's take a look at an example of that. MailChimp is an email marketing platform, and they've evolved a lot over time. They started out as a small business serving other small businesses. Anybody in here a MailChimp customer? Is maybe your employer is, or the marketing department where you work or support is? Yeah, it's familiar. Everybody knows that monkey. Anybody familiar or remember the MailChimp monkey? We used to see him a lot more. So early on, Freddie, that was his name, the mascot, he would appear and serve up copy, maybe in a voice bubble. He would appear throughout the platform. People would hear from Freddie with error messaging and all. You don't hear from him quite as much. He doesn't actually speak anymore, because over time, MailChimp has matured. They've kind of grown what they're doing. They're speaking to more than just email marketing. They're also no longer a small business. They now handle more than 60% of the world's email marketing. That's pretty enormous. They've also added other services like e-commerce, other things within their suite. The thing is, they never wanted to alienate their existing customers. And that was a real concern from many of those customers. When they were rolling out new products, there was this sense of, well, wait, are you still going to support my legacy needs? Don't forget about me. I don't want to have to kind of go to the back of the queue here for help. So in order to reassure those people and help them understand that we're not leaving you behind, don't worry, they've maintained certain aspects of the brand. Freddie doesn't speak so much anymore, but copy still remains in the first person. Now the tone is more robust. They've developed editorial style guidelines that allow them to have more variation among their different products. They can also vary it more depending on the needs of their audience. And if it's someone that is coming maybe from another marketing product, or if they've got deep expertise in marketing, they don't speak to them in the same level of detail as they might someone that is new to all of this. Branding still uses the same familiar yellow that they've always used. They're still kind of bright and sunny there. But now the illustration style has become more nuanced. People trust MailChimp. Customers that they've had for a long time that remain with them trust them because their voice is familiar and consistent. It isn't monolithic across products or across different target audiences, but it's inclusive of those different experiences. They've built a brand that is more inclusive of their needs and their audience in that way. And I want to take a peek at how they did this. So you can see here, this is just part of one of their internal style guidelines, how they vary between if they're speaking to beginners or speaking to experts. And these sort of tools can really help your internal audience, maybe of copywriters and designers that are trying to engage people in different ways. This was never about introducing big changes, but instead allowing for the evolution of the brand and then tailoring it to fit the needs of their different target audiences, as well as the needs of designers and content creators as well. And I want to just point out on this. So Kate Kiefer-Lee was, I believe, their original head of content strategy. She's now executive vice president of communications, corporate communications there. She wrote a wonderful book a few years ago with Nicole Fenton, another content strategist, talking about voice and tone and how you evolve both of them, how they differentiate between them, as well as then how you evolve them visually and verbally to meet the needs of your audience and to help your brand thrive, not necessarily rein it in too tightly, but how you still allow professional communicators in the organization to thrive. And you can see kind of as they've grown, they've kind of moved up this ladder. The monkey has gone away. He's just kind of still there in the logo and certainly in the name. But they've been able to grow over time because they've offered enough detail to allow their audience to kind of see where they're going, to find elements that they still know and trust in the brand. Now, when you build trust, some of that comes through in the kind of language that we use with our audiences. And it doesn't mean that we have to shy away from jargon. I'm not here to say jargon is bad. Rather, I think that conscious use of jargon, using the language of our audiences, the language that helps them understand that we understand their needs, that can be a pretty powerful tool because it establishes an in crowd. It also excludes other people who might say, oh, this language is very technical, or oh, this language, I don't understand some of the acronyms that you're using in it. And I think if we make those decisions consciously, certainly in technical documentation or interface design when we're trying to reach a specific audience, that can help us build trust too. So I want to start in this kind of first exercise, and this is where I'll be asking some folks to join in as well, to share a paragraph, it was about 30 seconds worth from a recent presentation that I heard. And I've coupled it with some marketing copy from a homepage as well. I want you to unpack it. I'll share it on screen, and I want you to think about it, and we'll be revising it a little bit together. So here's the language. Came across first with beat the challenge of silos between CorpCom, Marcom, and CSRs with our new CMC suite. Don't let teams get away with the CMC anymore. I mean, those things are all words. Yeah, somebody said abbreviation bingo. Those are all words, and I've seen those words come together in sentences before, but not sure I know what to do with that, but maybe I'm not the target audience. Let's take a look a little bit further down the page there. So you see it talks about productivity. I know what that is. Sales effectiveness. I'm not directly in sales, but I assume that just means selling well. Data consolidation with a single source of truth. Who wouldn't want that? Track email opens. They're using open as a noun, so maybe the audience includes SEO folks. Okay, we've also got things around hottest leads, juggle a stack of marketing and sales apps. I don't know what a marketing stack is. I hear a lot about full stack developers. Maybe we've got full stack marketers now. I prefer other things in stacks like papers or cookies or things like that. But take a look at this. I want you to sit with it for just a couple minutes. I'm curious to hear, what do you think works in this? And for the things that you feel don't work, how would you change them? And as you're thinking about that, I'd like to call a few people to the floor to kind of share their thoughts. So if you're able to turn on, I think I have to elevate you to a panelist, and then we'll turn on your mic and your camera and whatnot. So if you'd like to raise your hand, if you want me to call on you to bring you to the floor. Let's go maybe just another 30 seconds or so. All righty, I'm grabbing a few folks that I've seen sharing. Promoting you to panelists, which should allow you to turn on your mic and camera if you like. So tell me, Sarah, it sounds like we can hear you. What do you think? What's working here? What's not working at all?
Well, actually, I don't think anything is working at all, but that's just me. I have no sense of actually whose voice is actually being spoken here. There's so many acronyms. There's no sense of product. Way too much text. We don't even know what's important here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I think what you said, we don't know what's important here. It looks like, I hope I'm going to say this right, Patamawati just said that as well. We're not, it's not highlighting benefits by not focusing on solving problems. It doesn't help us focus at all on why is this relevant to me? It gets that idea of relevance. Anyone else want to speak up and share? I think Ulrika, you may be able to.
You actually have to unmute.
All right, well, I'm going to just pull out, oh, Andreas?
Yes, it worked for me.
Okay, great. What do you think? What's going on here? What works well and how would you change this?
First, I would need to know what their goal is with what they want to communicate. And then I would work from that on. I would think about what jargon can we use, what is our target audience, and then iterate and iterate and iterate on the message.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good approach. I think as I look at this, one of the big challenges that I see is that the voice isn't consistent and familiar. I mean, I don't know what a CMC suite is. I don't know what they mean by CSRs here. When they're talking about silos and beat the challenge, yeah, someone said the voice is not positive. It isn't speaking from a point of possibility. That's don't let teams get away with the CMC anymore. That's pretty aggressive. If we want to be able to meet people where they are, I think we need to start by acknowledging their reality and building them up, not saying don't do that. And I think this gets at an issue that I've seen from a lot of organizations. Rather than saying, here's what we did. This is what we experienced. This is what works for us. Instead, they say, do this, don't do that. And that doesn't respect their audience. We're effectively then talking down to the audience. It can be a pretty condescending tone. Content that whether it is visually or verbally presented, content that offers a consistent, familiar voice meets people where they are emotionally in terms of the language that they're using. And that's something that we can assess through user research. Now, maybe for this target audience, they know what CSRs are, and that's fine. In that case, using that acronym can be useful. It helps to kind of establish that common rapport with them. And we can't always assume that we are our users and do understand their vocabulary and their experiences. That would be arrogant. But then things like the CMC suite, well, it turns out by that they mean CorpCom, MarCom, and CSRs. That's their CMC. But they're kind of all of a sudden giving us this new term without explaining it. They're not giving us a ladder from what they know to what we should know. And that's kind of a tough thing, moving people from where they are to where you need them to be. But that's our job as designers, as writers, as professional communicators, to explain those types of things. Moreover, then when we see that those long blocks of copy, I think someone said, people don't read anymore. That's just too much. This is where storytelling could be much more helpful. And maybe it's through imagery. Maybe it's through showing an image that everybody can relate to of family or of working late in the office or of gathering with people kind of in the company break room. Maybe that's not such a relevant image anymore. But those kinds of ideas that can be so familiar are reassuring because we know how to read them visually. We know how to understand them intellectually and emotionally. And when we can engage people in that way, that sets a good stage then for storytelling. If I was working in this organization, I think that is the approach that I would take. So we establish rapport with familiar voice, familiar language, familiar imagery, but then also by not condescending, not talking down to our audiences, by speaking more from that personal perspective. If I go back to the example from MailChimp, look at how they say, we know what it's like to start small with big ideas. They're speaking in the first person for your first person plural. But that's a good stance for them because they're not saying, you should do this, but more, here's what worked for us. Your mileage may vary, but this is what worked for us. And we can relate to you and you can trust us because of that. That's a helpful place to start, whether you're speaking on a stage or whether an organization is speaking from its homepage or through help content or error messaging, to be able to say, looks like you just did this. We find this works best. Or are you experiencing this too? Here's what helps us. That can be a very useful thing. Now, I want to move on now to talking from voice to volume. So your brand's voice addresses how you communicate. Volume refers to how much you communicate in both length and level of detail. So how do you know how much to say on a topic? How do you know how many images should be in an image gallery, or even how detailed you should make a diagram or instructions? We know that brevity and bullets have ceded space to more long-form content, even on e-commerce sites and more kind of transactional experiences. So how do you know how to determine how much content is enough? Well, the answer comes through in things like user research, as well as looking at other metrics like product returns and the time people spend on a site. You know you've offered enough detail when people can make good decisions and feel good about the decisions they make. So they feel good. In other words, they're not returning the product that they just bought. They express comfort in the sense of completion in moving through a site. They're not going back and forth between pages to check to see did they get a form right. We can measure things like that. Those are our quantifiable details. We can also measure it in things like customer satisfaction surveys. And that's what the retailer, the electronics retailer Crutchfield does. So they sell electronics, camera equipment, camera lenses, home audio equipment, And they do that through really long pages that are packed with details. There are a lot of different content types here. So if you're buying a camera lens and you zoomed out on one of their pages, it would look like that image on the left. And you can zoom into specific details from that page and related pages to see, all right, what does this different camera lens look like if I'm shooting things at a short focal length or a long focal length? What does it mean to adjust focal length? Tell me more about aperture. You can read about it. There are bulleted lists. There are paragraphs. You can read kind of first-person reviews. You can also see diagrams, compare images side by side. There are videos to play on the site when maybe they're taking products apart and all. All of those types of things add up to give you a lot of information to make your decisions. They also add up to inform a more confident kind of shopping experience. What Crutchfield has seen with their user research is that when people spend a lot of time on the site, when they get to when they encounter one of these really long pages, they see people get to the end of that page and then click to keep reading more. They want to keep taking in more and more information because over time, they're not just learning, they're also gaining comfort with their knowledge, their level of expertise, so that they can feel like, okay, I know enough to make a good decision. I might have come to this website feeling like, camera lens, what's a camera lens? But by the time I buy a product, yeah, maybe I've played with it, maybe through an interactive demo. Maybe I've gotten to experience what it looks like in comparing different images side by side, and I feel like I can make a smart decision. That's all people want at the end of the day. We don't all want camera lenses, but we all want to feel smart. And when we can help people feel smart and like they can get good information, that's different than just kind of the false bravado of, oh, yeah, I know what I'm doing. Instead, it's that sense of, I know how to get good information. If I want to research this further, I know that I can, and I know that I've found a good source that I can trust to continue researching it. And the thing is, they don't just want people to feel comfortable. They want them to feel confident too, because in a world where the media and politicians and other retailers maybe are gaslighting us into believing that we shouldn't trust ourselves, smart brands can help us regain confidence in ourselves and in our ability to make good decisions, in our sense that we are knowledgeable people that know how to do good research. And that strengthens our sense of confidence in ourselves, in the organizations that inform us, and in our society itself. And I want to hold on this a second because, yes, I want you to tweet the heck out of this. I want you to say, this is how we need to move forward. We need to embrace this responsibility of empowering our users because that's what supports our organizations. That's what supports brands and businesses, and that's what supports society as well. And we do this, we owe this to our audiences, we owe this to our organizations because we're offering and building for them confidence through empowerment and then trust. And the thing that drives this is education. So it drives empowerment, empowerment drives confidence, and confidence drives trust. And you can call it customer loyalty if that's how you need to sell it, maybe internally. But it's also about creating a stronger society. And one of my favorite ways to kind of dig into this is also around what's going on with one of my favorite publishers. So America's Test Kitchen. I'll tell you right now, I'm not much of a chef, but I love reading their magazine or seeing their cooking show or reading through their cookbooks or looking at their emails or swiping through their site on my phone or browsing it on Instagram. They support all those different channels. And they're there because they want to meet people where they are, whether it's somebody that is getting the magazine in the mail or watching a television show, or they're hard pressed to figure out what to make for dinner and they're flipping through a recipe on their phone in Instagram. They're meeting people where they are, and they earn attention and love and loyalty because they work at empowering people where they are and offering them the right level of detail to meet their needs. And their mindset and channel and device. So in other words, if you're flipping through the magazine and you want to find maybe a really long, interesting discussion on the history of milling flour or how meat can be processed, you'll find that pages and pages of it. And there are people that love that level of detail. But if you're just flipping through a recipe and you pull it up on Instagram, it's beautiful. You can find each step as an image, and in the caption for that image, it says what you need to do in that step. They've made the directions that simple, so that what you're doing when you're cooking up a recipe or simply trying to advance your own techniques, it allows you to feel confident and smarter and like you're set up for success. They don't shy away from the details. Instead, they empower people with them. And they invest in the appropriate level of detail to help you engage your senses in this really immersive education. When we were looking back at Crutchfield, somebody said, oh, they should have interactive demos. What is more interactive than cooking? And this idea that you can engage all of your senses to know if you're doing it right, to know, all right, is that bread ready? Yeah, when it smells like this, or when you take it out of the oven, you can kind of thump the bottom of it. I guess it would be more of like a to the bottom of it. And does it sound right? Does it sound sort of hollow? That's how you know that it is finished baking inside. They try to help people engage all of their senses and bring them into owning that learning experience. Because this isn't about hearing from maybe one famous chef with one big ego. This isn't about ego, but about science, about empowering people with enough information so that they can be the chef. They can be their own heroes in the kitchen. That's what drives their publishing. They're selling empowerment, not a cult of personality. And as Jack Bishop, the chief creative officer, we sat down together when I was doing research for my book, Trustworthy, a few years ago, and he said, success breeds confidence. So when we help our users do well, when we help them maybe go through a shopping cart experience and then get a message that says, thank you, we got your order, here's what to expect next. Or when we bring them through maybe a wizard tool and they feel like they know where they are in the process and they know how much time the process will take. Or even if they're browsing a site and they feel like, all right, the architecture of this site is intuitive, I know where to find what I'm looking for, and I know that when I get there, I will see all the options that fit within this category. When people feel successful in their efforts, that's when they feel most confident. And when we help our users do well, maybe feel smart or accomplished or even proud of what they did, that's when they become more confident both in themselves and in us, in the organizations that brought them to that point of confidence. Now, confident decisions take a certain amount of content, visually and verbally. It's not always more content. And I think a perfect kind of example of that is what we've seen over the past few years with changes from gov.uk. So they had to reckon with this idea that more content is not always better content. Because it used to be in the UK that citizens could get government service information from 9 different websites, as well as from the Guardian, the newspaper there. And in fact, for kind of the official information, official versions of things, they would oftentimes instead turn to newspapers over government websites. And that's always great if you work in government. So the government's answer to this problem of volume and platform proliferation and, oh my goodness, version control, it was refinement and editing. And also adopting this mantra that not all topics needed more content to earn trust. And also that government did not need to speak on all topics. The mantra that they adopted was that government should only create content on the things that only government can create content. In other words, or for example, they previously had a section on keeping bees. Now they had information on what sort of tax forms you needed to fill out if you wanted to import bees to the country. But then they also had all of this other agricultural information on beehives and the different types of bees and what you might want to consider. And that's not the business that they're in. That's not the business of government. Taxation is the business of government. We know that. So they took that approach of saying, let's let other people handle the content that other people can handle. Let's focus on doing what only we can do. And in adopting that idea and paring content down to the essentials. The government design services team cut the content they were supporting from 75,000 pages down to 3,000. It's a much better experience for them in terms of maintenance and sustainability now. It's also a much better experience for British citizens. So how do you know when you have enough content? How do they know when they had cut enough but not too much? Well, they brought people in for focus groups and usability testing to say, all right, we need you to find this information. What if you needed to fill out this kind of form? What if you needed to research this topic? How would you do it? And frequently what people said was, well, they would click around and then they would say, oh, that's it? That's it. That's good. They added the official kind of British seal there so that people knew that the information was official and canonical and complete. And then they left feeling confident that they had made the right decisions. I should say the designers left those usability tests feeling confident they had made the right decisions. And also their users left those experiences feeling more confident in the information they were getting. Now, this is a call for content design and information design to determine the right content types to support people on the different platforms that we support. And it's also an opportunity to establish a point of view, maybe your own kind of mantra for creative direction. So I want to take some time now to dig into an exercise on this. I always believe that as we're learning things, information can be inspiring, but let's practice it. Let's use it so that when you leave this, you also feel a little bit more confident that you know how to employ these concepts and can bring it back to your own work and team because you practiced it a little bit today. So if voice addresses how you communicate, and we saw kind of opportunities to improve that, and volume refers to how much you communicate, how can you do that? How can you pare it down enough? And I think this is where you can vary things and determine how much is enough. So I want you to take this opportunity, and we'll take maybe like a minute or two on this. And then I'll be looking for people to raise their hands that want to share. And you don't have to turn on your camera if you don't want to. Curious, if you wanted to pitch a new concept to your audience and maybe think about the target audience for a brand you support, or if you're self-employed, or maybe pitching a new talk at a conference, or looking to kind of pitch your portfolio to a company, how do you bring them a new concept, maybe a new product or idea or service, and convey it with just a single sentence, what it is and why they should do it? So let's take a minute, and then I want to hear what you come up with. All right, anybody want to raise a hand? You can turn on your mic. Okay, more time. All right. Hi, Tracy.
Hello.
Hi there. Okay, so tell us, what's the concept that you're pitching?
So I work for a product consulting firm, and our kind of pitch to our customers is that we are partners in bringing your product vision to life.
Mm, I
And we've tried
like
to keep
that.
it succinct.
I like that. So let's unpack that. We are partners in bringing your product vision to life. Was that it?
Yep, that's it.
How come
It's your product
partners?
vision.
How,
That's
how
it.
come partners?
Oh, for us, it was really about working with our customers. That we're not this consultancy off in the corner that you feed a few things to, and we bring back this fully fledged thing and kind of dump it on you. But it's really about working together, especially since some of our clients are looking for more than a product. They're looking for some organizational change. So we want to help teach them, how to carry this product on themselves too.
Mm,
So it's not just we've given you a black box, we're done now.
yeah.
So we really wanted to emphasize that working together side of things.
All right, let me ask, do folks believe her? Do you trust her? Do you trust that her company will be a supportive partner and all? Sarah says, I like the partner aspect. Oh, all companies say that. Yeah, that's true. I feel like we hear that a lot. All right. Anybody else want to share? Sorry, Tracy, I didn't mean to like put you on the spot there and say you're doing it wrong or anything like that.
No, it's totally okay. We've been trying to evolve this message as well, and we are currently talking to some customers to help evolve it. So it's
This
good
is
to hear what other
interesting.
people have to say.
So Sarah said, I'd feel better if I heard from past partners if they followed through. Why don't we move on then? So next task. How could you convey that information? Maybe with a story. Maybe not even hearing from past partners, but what would it look like? What would it sound like to convey that same information that we are partners without even saying that? And maybe that's the opportunity then to instead open up, maybe it's a homepage or maybe it's a newsletter to prospective customers, or other kind of advertising by saying, here was a recent thing that we celebrated. Working with name of a client, we helped them over the course of a year do something. So it's something that communicates enduring commitment and working together. That could be interesting. Anybody else want to share maybe how you convey like the information of what you're offering, what you can do with a story or an anecdote? I think we saw like in that example from MailChimp, how in them speaking in the first person by saying, we did this. We were a small marketing company too. We were a small business. And now look, here's what works for us. That's something that can be really useful to allow other people to say, oh, me too, to kind of envision themselves maybe on the other end of that kind of partnership or going through the same sort of learning experience. Oh, MailChimp grew from this small company that had a monkey that did all of its error messaging. Maybe we can too. I really believe in this kind of moving from primate-based communication in all of our industries. And I think though that's something, that idea of using story to allow other people to see themselves in the experience, to see themselves using the product, that can be useful as a content type because it allows us to stop speaking so much about you should do this, trust us to work with you in this way. It allows us to move away from that and instead let other people see themselves as part of the experience. That's something that Crutchfield does. I mentioned that one of the content types on their site is video, where you see how they take products apart. And in order to do that, oftentimes they go out to kind of the parking lot behind the company offices, and they will take apart stereo systems, maybe saw through a cooler so that you can see like what's going on with the materials on the inside. And the way they film that isn't very slick. It's not very highly produced or anything, because they want it to feel natural. It's showing like, okay, if you were standing right here in our shoes in the parking lot, this is what you would be seeing too. So you get that kind of first person perspective on the camera too. Isabel, can you talk about that more? You said the humanistic side is missing. It's not conveying why you want to help others. Let me see if I can go ahead and turn on your mic.
I'm not sure if you hear me.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's important to grasp the kind of conveying the kind of sense of why you care. It's easy to just say that you want to help people or you want to partner or so on, but the question, the humanistic side of what I think many designers think about is why. Why do you want to do certain things, and how can you help them on that part? So I think that is the next question I would feel if I would hear that from someone.
That's a really good point. And I think going back to that idea of authority and expertise, if you're there in the team, maybe sitting down the hall from the product development team, and you know how people can benefit, oftentimes in our communication, we'll lead with features instead of benefits, like that by using our service or this product offers you X, Y, and Z in terms of features. People don't want features. They want to know how those new features will benefit them in speed or in clarity or quality. So I think to be able to move into that is pretty useful. Why don't we move on then? So how can you go even further? How can you offer even more detail in an organization? So we started out with the single sentence, then building it out to maybe offer story around it. What does it mean then when you can go further and illustrate a story with images or maybe pull in additional examples or other reference points, citations, if you will? And I think one of the comments kind of touched on this by saying, what would it be like if you heard from past customers? Oh, Ulrika said, kids too loud in the background to speak. That is relatable. But yeah, the what's in it for me in reverse. So how could that work then? What are some other content types that would allow you to elevate a story? And I don't know if anybody else wants to share from kind of your experience and what you're doing, or how you would pitch a product and maybe bring in some of those other elements to better illustrate this. Okay, Pedro, sorry, this is a little bit clunky. Let me turn on your mic. Go ahead. I think you should be able to. Oh, it looks like you need to turn on your mic there. While you're working on that, I want to share kind of another example around this, and I think we see this oftentimes with more visual experiences. Oh, go ahead. I think we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Right, cool. So one approach that we use is that we assume our that we know nothing, that all the we have are hypotheses around the problem that we are trying to solve. So what we did in our case was to try to empathize with the user, with the person that we actually think that there's a problem there to be solved. And we came up with hypotheses. So what do you think that we know that we can help? What kind of problems do we think that they have? And then we tried to work around these assumptions to understand if those were valid, if actually there was a problem there to be solved. Because the thing is, we're trying to solve a problem, but we actually don't have a solution. So we actually are in love with the problem, trying to deep dive on it, and then, okay, let's discuss now how we can solve that. And it all came across validation and talking to the users all the time, and trying to be as fast as possible in this contacts to identify if we're building the right thing, and then only focusing on building the thing right, on how to make it fast and elegant and a good way to deliver. So
I love that. Well,
thank you.
The way you described, like, to empathize with your users, to not just fall in love with the problem, but to fall in love with your users too. I know that's something that Jared Spool talks about a lot as well, and Dana Chisnell. And I think that's so important. That's also what allows us to, I want to say, kind of like fall a little less in love with our own ideas. Which I think that actually helps us move on, I think, to the next part then, talking about vulnerability and how we're able to step away from our own ideas and allow them to grow, to allow ourselves to grow. So individually, a consistent voice, appropriate volume of detail, those I think are characteristics of good brand-driven content strategy and design. It's through vulnerability that the efforts in voice and volume unite to foster trust. So by vulnerability, I mean the risk that we take for connection. So being willing to take on the risk of criticism or ridicule or maybe even rabid customers. It's that cost of transparency and authenticity. And it's what we take on if it means that we can maybe take on the greater reward of finding greater loyalty from our customers, and maybe also more customers, expand our target audience. You make your brand vulnerable by engaging in transparency around how you're learning, how maybe you experienced a problem or a mistake and how you're building back from it, and allowing your audience to hold you accountable too. And I don't want to say that kind of transparency is without risk. It takes strength, it takes courage, but don't mistake it for weakness either. The smartest brands grow stronger and gain trust by owning their mistakes, prototyping in public, and also by making their values more visible. So vulnerability can mean a lot about putting a stake in the ground and saying, this is what we believe in, this is who we are. And that can sometimes turn off some customers. Penzeys is a spice retailer that is based in the US in the Midwest. And they did what we oftentimes call putting yourself out there. So when you're a company and you put yourself out there and you say, this is what we believe, these are the causes that we support, that's how you find your community. And increasingly, that is what people want. More and more consumers, it's up to over 60% now, say that they do want to know what the organizations, where they spend their money, what they support. In the wake of the 2016 election here in the US, the owner of Penzeys, Bill Penzey, the owner of this big chain, he took to Facebook to make clear the company's values and perspective on immigration and racism, because he felt that the then incoming president stoked hatred for immigrants, and he ran counter to the company's purpose. He said, here, what we do, we bring people together around the act of cooking. And for anybody that might have said, hey, stay in your lane, you're a cooking company, why are you talking about politics? He doubled down on authenticity. He said, this is our lane, because cooking and recipes tell the story of immigration, especially here in the US. Most of the recipes that we hold dear, our family favorites, represent the story of human immigration. Now that is risky. He lost customers. He gained far more customers. Every time he would write a post like this or go out on Twitter with this kind of message, they would see how sales would spike, and they would be getting more customers than they had ever had before, because it was people that didn't necessarily love to cook, but they love to buy presents for people that do cook. And they said, oh, I'm going to buy them here. Over the past few years, Penzies has enjoyed a 50% increase in their online sales, because as more people got to know the brand, know what they stood for, they could trust the brand. He gave them reasons to understand the organization. So here we can see how vulnerability, like voice, it's an act that tells people who you are and how you are and empowers them with information. He wasn't hiding who they were anymore. He said, this is what we believe in. What do you believe in? What do you think? And that allowed them to make more informed decisions about where they wanted to do business. Now, it's risky for a brand to put a stake in the ground. It takes even more vulnerability, though, to acknowledge problems and deficiencies, like if a company screws up. Your organization is at its most vulnerable when you've had like a big public kind of mistake and you're still reeling from that. But what matters most is what comes next. Do you double down on defeat, or do you embrace an opportunity to own your story and explain what happened so that you can say, here's how that's never going to happen again? So maybe you're familiar with these little gizmos. These are called fidget cubes. A company called Ansi Labs started on Kickstarter and produced them through a Kickstarter campaign a few years ago. And it was a huge campaign, went off the rails. They got 400 times more people backing it than they had anticipated, which meant then they had a hard time keeping up with demand. Manufacturing. They encountered manufacturing problems that were now at a huge scale. And the product that they'd once promised as a great Christmas stocking stuffer type thing, it turned out it didn't finish shipping until the following April. Kind of a problem for a Christmas type product. So what did they do? Well, they started communicating with their audience much more frequently, posting lots of updates on Kickstarter. They explained what was happening with manufacturing, what they were learning about the manufacturing process. Then they started fielding more than 2,000 incoming emails a day. So then they talked about how they were going to staff up to be able to respond to those emails. As the products started shipping out, they started getting much more positive communication from their customers, because they had said, hey, we messed up. Here's what we're going to do. Let us tell you more about it. And here's how you can hold us accountable. That's been happening with Zoom too. I know we're talking about Zoom on Zoom. It's kind of meta, but over the past year, we've seen what's happened with Zoom. Now, in December of 2019, they had about 10 million daily meeting participants, all business users, all supported by IT teams. That changed because when the pandemic really set in, a lot more people were jumping on Zoom. Teachers, family members, anybody that wanted to celebrate a happy birthday or gather together with their family over Zoom. By March of 2020, those 10 million daily meeting participants had ballooned to 200 million daily users, most of whom didn't have IT teams, and we started seeing problems with security, privacy, Zoom bombing, all those issues. Now, the CEO responded to those issues not by blaming the Zoom bombers or telling people, oh, you're using it wrong. You need to start using our security features. Instead, he wrote a blog post that brings together all these ideas we've been talking about. It's a model of vulnerability, consistent voice, and empowering details. He said, we recognize what has happened. He spoke in a humble but confident voice and said, I am deeply sorry. He apologized in the singular, and then he shared credit for what will happen in the plural. So he explained what happened, then offered a level of detail that really demonstrates respect for his audience's intelligence. That's pretty useful, especially when he moves on then to credit the community and then offering a plan to hold him accountable. He was going to be holding town halls, offering access to an independent security audit, and start making those waiting rooms and password protections mandatory on all new meetings. He explained exactly what to expect. So voice and volume and vulnerability, those are the things that can add up to empower people and renew their confidence and rebuild trust. And as we stumble back from cynicism and gaslighting, that's what people need now more than ever. Regardless of the industry that you're in, your brand can help be a leader in moving us forward. Here's what that looks like. Here's how you can test what you're doing. Are you using familiar design, familiar language to help people move forward with enough detail, the right volume of detail, that they can make good decisions? And then speaking with vulnerability to say, here's where we want to go, here's what we stand for, here's how we're moving forward, here's how we're growing as well. Because business can be a force for good. Your organization can be a force for good and a leader in moving us forward, because we have so many reasons to be cynical. And cynics look at the world and say, ugh, it's worse. Designers look at the world as it is and say, it can be better, and let's make it better. And if you're hopeful that it can be, let's work so that it will be. Because despite all of our reasons to be cynical, we all still act with hope. We think that we can become smarter. We think that we can learn a little bit more and become more confident. So this is how we design our way out of cynicism, toward trust, and toward hope. Thank you very much. I look forward in working with you on this. And if you are fired up about this, I know we're at time, but if you're bullish about this as I am, please go pre-order. This is the new book. Your pre-orders make such a huge difference. It's packed with more case studies like this. It will be released March 2nd, just a couple of weeks now. But if you go pre-order, email me your receipt, and I will send you the first few chapters as a PDF so you can get started reading right away. I know my publisher was kind of like, do you want to do that? We can't really do that. And I said, we can do that. We can do that for this group. So thank you very, very much. And I'll be answering more questions. I know we had at least one pop up. I'll be answering them more in Slack as well. So yeah, let's go jump over there. Thank you very much, everybody.